Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I've actually added this part after I finished the tutorial, because I realized you may be completely beginner at JSON Web Tokens and I didn't talk anything about what a JWT token is. So I'm going to do that shortly before we start creating stuff in this tutorial. I recommend you to check out jwt.io/introduction. On that page, they'll describe everything that you need to know about JSON Web Tokens. And we can check out the first part here. What is JSON Web Token? JSON Web Token is an open standard that defines a compact, self-contained way for securely transmitting information between parties as a JSON object. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build this in our application and send along a JSON Web Token, and that is a JSON object. And also this information can be verified and trusted because it is digitally signed, and the token can be signed using a secret or you can encrypt it. We are going to use a secret, meaning that on our server part, we are going to have a secret that we'll sign our JSON Web Tokens with. So a JSON Web Token is a JSON object that we can use to transmit information between our server and our application in the client. And you can also read down below here, they tell you why you should use it and when you should use it. In our case, we're going to use it for authentication and authorization. And I think, as they say, this is the most common use case, because when using a JWT token, we don't have to send along our login and password on each request. We can just send the token, and the token can guarantee that it's the correct user that sends the request. So that's a main advantage of using a token. We don't have to send along the login and the password on each request. We can just send along the token, and we will know that the user is legit. And they also mention that the overhead is small and it has the ability to be easily used across different domains. So that's the main advantages of using a JW token in your authentication and authorization system. So in our case, we're building this very lightweight server. And from this server, we're also going to generate this token and send it along to the client when the user logs in. All right, we can continue to scroll down here. They also describe what parts there is in a JSON Web Token. And you have a header, a payload, and the signature. And here is how it looks. First you have the header, then you have a dot, and then the payload, a dot, and the signature. So the header will mostly contain data about that this is a JWT, and also the signing algorithm for the token. And then we have our payload. We can send along what we want here. In our case, we're going to send the user, and we're going to have the email address in this very, very basic example that we're going to build. So the user can log in and we send along the email address to the client. So the email is going to be the username in our case. But you can put some other data here also, of course. And in this case, I think they have the name and they have if this one is admin and other stuff here. Okay, and then we have the last part, that's the signature. And we're going to sign our token with a secret that we set on our server. That way we know that this token is guaranteed to be generated from our server, because we're always going to verify that it's signed correctly. All right, so I think that's about it. That's a very short introduction to JWT tokens, and we can get started to create our application and our server. I'm going to talk a little about JSON Web Tokens and how you can authenticate your application with refresh tokens and access tokens. And there's actually a few good tutorials out there, but they are using a lot of stuff that you don't need to understand the concept of JSON Web Tokens. So my take on this is that I create a very simple Express server where we set up our endpoints, just regular REST endpoints. And I won't even use a database. We're just going to use a fake database object for this one, so it won't persist the data. Of course, you don't need that if you're just learning the basics. All right. So nothing fancy in the server, in the backend. And I'm just going to use React for the front end. And we're going to fetch the endpoints with no external library or anything like that. So hopefully this will be a good way for you to learn about JSON Web Tokens if you're new to the subject. And also I will say this, that I'm not a security expert. I'm mostly a front-end developer, but I do some back-end stuff also. So this is not in any way any code you should use in production. And the code may also be a little bit verbose because I want to show you all the details on how this works. My main goal with this tutorial is to show you how the JSON Web Token flow works, between the server and your application and how you can use it. It's not to create a very secure API that you can use in production. All right, so let's get started. First of all, create a folder of your choice. I called mine JWT Auth. And inside of this, we're going to create another folder that's called server. We're going to have two folders for this one. One is the server and one is for the front end. So first we set up all the routes, all the REST endpoints for us that we can use in our application. All right. And we are going to use Express for this one. First we have to type npm init to create our project. Yeah, and it will give us some defaults here. This one will call it JWT Auth, and that's fine. Version is 1. Description, you can have a description here if you want. API server or entry point, it's going to be the index.js file, so that's fine. And test command, we're not going to do any tests here. And git repository, none. Keywords, none. You can just press enter here. Is this okay? Yes, enter. All right. So it's created a packaged JSON file for us. And let's go inside of our code editor. And we can have a look at that file. And as you can see, it created this stuff for us here. All right, then we have to install some packages. We're just going to use Express, but there's some packages that are going to help us in the creation of our API. So we are going to install something that's called bcrypt.js. And with this one, we can hash our password because you don't want to store your password in a database, or in our case, a fake database. We have to hash it and also salt it. You can read about bcrypt at this page here, or you can, I'm not going to go through it in detail here. Then we're going to install something that's called cookie parser, and this will help us to get the cookies from the request. So what it will do is to create an object that's called cookies, where we just can grab our cookie that we're going to use for the refresh token. Then we're going to install a package that's called course, because we don't want to have any cross-origin issues here. So we're going to install this and configure it. And we're going to use environmental variables for this one. So we install the package .n, and I'm going to show you this in a second. And of course, we have Express that we're going to use. And then we're going to create JSON Web Tokens. So we have a package for this also. And lastly, we are going to use something that's called NodeMon. And this one will, it will make our development a little bit easier, because it will restart the node server as soon as we make any changes, and we don't have to do that ourselves manually. Okay, and then I'm using Postman to test our endpoints. It's free, so I think Postman is very good to use for this. All right, so let's get back into our terminal and install these packages. So we type npm I, and we have bcrypt.js. We have our cookie dash parser, we have our course or .n, and we have Express, we have our JSON Web Token, and the NodeMon is actually going to be a dev dependency, so we install that one after this one. Okay, let's take a look inside of our code. It installed here, as we can see. That's good. And the NodeMon, we just install it like a dev dependency here. So we have npm I nodemon -- save - dev, and it will install it for us as a dev dependency. Okay, you can see that it added it here as a dev dependency, and that's great. So that's all that we need for this API to work, and we're going to start coding it now. First, we can create a new file that we call .n, because we're going to create some environmental variables here. And the first one is going to be called access_token_secret. And it's going to equal, you can select whatever you want here. I will, of course, use Weben rules. Yeah! Okay, maybe I should spell this correctly also. 2 C's in access. Okay, then we have our refresh_token_secret. And this one is going to be Weben rules even more. And then we have the port. It's going to be on port 4000. All right, so we just save this one. Then we're going to create a new folder here that we call src. And inside of the src, we can create a new file that's called index.js. Okay, so we're going to start importing some stuff here. First of all, we're going to require .n/config. And this one will make sure that we can use the environmental variables here. Then we create a const named express, and we require express. We are not using ES6 imports here because this is Node, and this is the standard as you do it in Node. You can do it with ES6 imports if you install some packages, but we're not going to do that here. So we import express. Then we have our cookie parser. Require cookie-parser. We have our course. And we have our verify that we're going to grab from the JSON Web Token library. And make sure you have these curly braces here because we're just importing the verify from that one. Then we're going to grab hash and compare. Require bcrypt.js. Right? So that's all what we need for now. We're going to do a little bit more imports here later on when we create more files and stuff here. So what are we going to do now? We have a few steps here. One, we're going to create an endpoint where we can register a user. Two, we're going to have an endpoint for login a user. Three, we also want to be able to log out the user. Four, we're going to set up a protected route. And five, get the new access token with a refresh token. And of course, you should have something that you can revoke the refresh tokens with, but I'm not going to go through that in this tutorial because I want to focus on the most basic stuff here just to show you how JSON Web Tokens work. Okay, first we create our Express server. Const server equals Express. That's the one we imported up here. So that will create the server for us. And then we want to use Express middleware for easier cookie handling. So server.use, and we call our cookie parser. And this will make sure that we can handle the cookies a lot more easier. Then we're going to set up our course because we don't want to have issues with that later. Server.use, and we have our course that is going to take in an object. We have an origin, http:///localhost. And we are going to have our front end on port 3000 because we're going to use create React app, and that one is default port 3000. Then we're going to set the credentials to true. Okay, so this will make sure that our front end and our server can communicate with each other. Then we need to have a couple of rows here so we can read our body data. And we can actually type out the comment here. Needed to be able to read body data. Okay, we grab our server and use, and from our express, we can just call express.json like this. And this will make sure that we support JSON encoded bodies. I can make a quick comment here also to support JSON encoded bodies. Then server.use from express. Yet again, this is built-in express. URL encoded. For this one, we send in an object with extended and set that one to true. And this one supports URL encoded bodies. All right. So this is our configuration for our Express server, and we can actually get it up and running also, and then we're going to create our endpoints. And to get it up and running, we can just server.listen. And from our process.n, we have our environmental variable called port inside of here. So we just grab this one with this. Then we have an inline arrow function here. And we can just console log out something here. Server listening on port. This is a template literal, so we can just grab process.n.port. And we end it with another backtick. And I should, of course, remove this one. You can save it. And then go inside our terminal, clear it. And we actually don't have a start script for this one, so we can create this one also. So let's go back inside of our package.json file, and where you see this property named scripts, we can create another one here that's called start. And we are using NodeMon for this one. As I said, this one is going to make sure that we don't have to restart the server every time we change something in our code. So we just call our index.js file here. And this is an object, so make sure you have a comma there also. So we save this one, go back inside of our terminal and type npm start. And as you can see, it's starting up our server here, and that's good. So we know that it's working, and then we can create our endpoints. And I'm actually going to go through this quite fast, because I think this course is more focused on a front-end developer that want to learn about JSON Web Tokens and not how to create the backend itself. But I have to create it here to be able to show you how the JSON Web Token and the flow between the front end and the server will work. So that's why I create the backend here also. And you probably will learn something about it, even if you're not a backend developer at all. So back into our code and inside our index.js file. So first of all, we're going to create an endpoint for register a user. So we have our server, and this is going to be a post request, and we're going to have register in our endpoint URL. So it's basically going to be our server, that's localhost, and then /register for this endpoint. And this one is going to be async. We have our request and our response. And we're going to send in the email and the password with the body, so we can grab these ones from the body. We destructure them out, email and password, from the request body. And we have to do a few things here now. We're going to type our code inside our try block, and then we have our catch that is going to catch the error for us. So inside of here, we're going to do a lot of stuff. First, we're going to check if the user exists. And we're going to do that from our fake database. But I want to populate the fake database with a user. So I'm going to need a hashed password for that one. So that's why I'm going to create a hashed password and console log it out. And then I can just copy and paste it inside of my fake database that I'm going to create. So const hashed password. We await hash. And we have our password. That's the one we got up here. And we're going to salt it. And this is how many times you want to calculate the salt. So I think 10 times maybe, something like that. So this will give us a hashed password. And we can console log this out. And save it. I'm going to start up the server again. And I'm going to go inside of Postman now and use that one. So I have this endpoint that's called register. And I actually have it up here. On our local host and port 4000, we have the register endpoint, and I've attached an email and a password to the body. So if I send this one, hopefully it will console log out a hashed password for us. And it did. So I'm just going to grab this one from the console, copy it, go back inside of my code, create a new file inside of the source folder here, and call it fakedb.js. Then I'm going to export fakedb, and it's going to be an array that's going to have different objects with the different users. So we create an object, we set the ID to 0, the email is going to be my mail. You can of course use your own here, like this, and then we have the password, and inside of this string I just paste in this password. Can also make a note here, the password is test. So this is a fake database that we're going to use. Save this one. Can go back inside of our index.js file, and we can finish this register endpoint. So first of all, we're going to check if the user exists. Const user from the fake DB. Of course, we also have to import it up here. So const fake DB equals require, and we grab it from ./fakedb.js. Okay. In our fake DB, this is just an array, so we can just use the array method find, and we have our user. We check if our user email equals our email. So we check if this email exists in our database, and this one here is the one that we got from the body. And of course, in the real world here, you should do some connection to a real database and check for that there. So this is a fake DB. This is just an array with JavaScript objects, but you're going to use a real database here in the real world in production. But for now, this will do for us. Okay. Then if we have a user, we're actually going to throw an error here, because if a user exists, we shouldn't be able to register a new user with the same email. So we throw new error, user already exists. If not user exists, hash the password. And we've already done that here, so we don't have to do that again. We have it stored in the hashed password const. So 3, insert the user in, and I'm going to put this inside of quotes, because this is not a database, this is just a fake database. But you insert the user in your database, and we can just push the user inside the fake DB array. Fake DB push. So we create an object, we have an ID, fake DB.length. The length is always going to be larger than the index, so that's why we can use the length here. Because if we have one post in our database, as we have now, this is the index 0, but the length is going to be 1. So that's why we can use the length here. Then we have our email, and we have our password, and this one is going to be the hashed password. And we have a comma there, of course. Okay. So we have stored the user in the database, so we can send back a response to the client, res.send. And we have an object with a message of user created. Like so. Instead of console log out the hashed password here, we can actually console log out the fake DB. All right. Then we also have to catch if we have some errors. So we send back a response with an error, and we just send the error message, error.message. All right, and do a little bit of auto formatting there. So this should be it for the register endpoint. So we try it out in Postman. And I created this once now, so I have to actually kill the server now and start it again because I want to clean up my fake database. So I go back in Postman. I've put the email and the password in the body. That's my email address with a 3 and also the test as password. So I send this one, user created, that's great. And as you can see, we are console logging out the database. We have 2 users here now, and that's great. Go back inside of Postman. I try to register the exact same user, and it tells me that the user already exists, and that's great. So we can't register the same user twice. So we know that it's working. That's our register endpoint. Now we're going to create our login endpoint. Yeah, and I should, of course, move this one to the bottom. Like this. Log in a user. All right. Yet again, we have a server.post. We create a post request, and it's going to be login. We have an async inline function here. We have the request and the response, and an arrow function. And yet again, from our body, we want to grab our email and our password. So we destructure them out from our request.body. Then we have a try and a catch with the error like so. And inside the try block, we're going to type out our code. So first, find user in array or in database. If not exist, send error. Right? Const user fakedb.find. This is the exact same step as we did before. So we just check if the user email equals the email. And now we check if not user, if we don't have a user, throw new error. User does not exist. All right. So if we don't have a user, we cannot log in. 2, compare encrypted password and see if it checks out. Send error if not. So we create a new const that's called valid. We await, and we have this compare function from the bcrypt library. So we compare our password. That's the one we got up here from the body. And then we have a password stored in our database from the user password. So we compare these two and see if they are the same. So if not valid, throw new error. Password not correct. So if it not checks out, we just send an error and tell the user that the password is wrong. But if it's correct, we can create a refresh and access token. Like this. And the idea today is to have a refresh token and an access token. Your access token should have a really short lifetime, and the refresh token should have a longer lifetime and stored, for example, as a protected cookie that you cannot use from inside of the JavaScript in your client. We're going to create 2 tokens, one refresh and one access token. So first we have our access token, and we're going to have to create this somehow. And we have a refresh token that we also need to create somehow. And we're actually going to create a new file here. Just call it tokens.js. And inside of this file, we first import sign, require. We require it from JSON Web Token. Then we create the function here, create access token. We're going to send in the user ID as a parameter. And from this one, we're going to return something. And we're going to return sign. We call that sign that we imported up here. We give it an object with the user ID, and then from our process.env.access underscore token secret. So we sign it with that secret, and we also include our user ID. Then we have an object where we could set the expire time. Expires in. And for this one, we're going to set to 15 minutes. So this is how we create the access token. We can just copy this one and paste it in. And we can rename it to create refresh token. And we change this one to refresh underscore token underscore secret. And it expires in 7 days. That's a week. Okay, and for now, we just module export. And we export our create access token and our create refresh token, so we can use them in our index.js file. So of course we have to import them up here at the top first. Const create access token and create refresh token require. And it's going to be from./tokens.js. All right, we're good to go. We can use these ones inside of this file now. So first we create an access token, create access token. We send in the user.id. That's the one that we got from the database. And here we create the refresh token. And we also send in the user.id. And in the real world, in the real life, you could also create different versions of the refresh token and store it in your database, or just store a version number if you don't want to store the complete refresh token. And you can compare it, you can sign it as we do here. You can also sign it here with the, that's the access token, the refresh token. You can have a version number here. And then you can check the version number, and when you revoke the refresh token, you just increase the version number, and that way that token could never be used again. But for the sake of the simplicity of this tutorial, I'm not going to do anything of this. I've just created one refresh token, so if you want to make some function to revoke it, you just can delete this one from the fake DB. But keep in mind that you can have different versions of refresh tokens. So for now, put the refresh token in the database. And we already have our user here. So we can just mutate this one. We create a new property that's called refresh token. And we just give it the refresh token. So we save that one inside of the database there. And if we want, we can also console log out the fake DB here. So we can see that this actually gets created. All right, so we have our access token and our refresh token created. Then we have to send them to the client somehow. So 5, send token, refresh token as a cookie, and access token as a regular response. All right. And we're going back inside our tokens.js because I'm going to create 2 functions for us that is going to handle the send of the tokens. So just below here, we create another function, send access token. And we have the response, the request, and the access token. And we just do a response send. You could, of course, do this inside of the index file also, but I did this to, kind of structure it a little bit. So we send the access token, and we can also, we can send the email also from the request body.email. All right. And then we have const send refresh token. For this one, we're going to have the response and the token. We can call it refresh token. All right. And for this one, we're setting a cookie instead. We don't want to send it with a regular response. So we have res cookie. We're going to call the cookie refresh token. You can, of course, call it something more secret, because now you can just check the cookie and see that this is a refresh token. But I do it like this so we easily can track this token. That's why. Then we have our token. And we have an object. We're going to set it to HTTP only. And this makes sure that we can't access this cookie from our client. You can't modify the cookie with JavaScript. And we're also going to set a path, because we don't want to send this cookie along with each request. We just do it when we're on the refresh_token endpoint. This is the endpoint we're going to use when we want to get a new access token with our refresh token. And I'm going to come back to that later. All right, we also have to export these ones. Send access token and send refresh token, like this. So that's all for our tokens.js file. Let's go back inside of index.js and inside our login user function here. Of course, we first have to import them up here. So we import send access token and send refresh token. All right, now we can go back inside of this one here. Just below here. We first send the refresh token. We have the response and the refresh token itself. And then we call send access token. We have the response, the request, and the access token. Maybe they should be the other way around here. Maybe have the request first and the response as the second parameter. But yeah, hey, it's like this now. Okay. All right, so that's it. We just have to catch any errors if we get that here. So we have res.send, just as we did before. We have an object and an error message. Backticks. It's a template literal. We grab the error.message and end it with a backtick like this. Auto format it and save it. So we can go back inside of Postman and we can try to log in here. As you can see in the body, I send the email and the password. So we try to send it. Okay, we have some error here. Create access token is not a function, all right? Yeah, I know why. It should be exports here, not export. So make sure you have an S there also if you also miss that one. So save it and go back inside of Postman and we try this again. And then we have another error here. Token is not defined. All right. Yeah, of course, I renamed this one here inside of tokens.js. It should be refresh token and save this one. I actually called it token first, but I changed it now when I record this to refresh token because it makes more sense. So it should be refresh token. And back again inside of Postman, we try it again. And as you can see, we get an access token back and we also get our email back. And did we get something inside of the database? Yeah. You can see I console logged out the database here and the refresh token has been created and it's now in the database. So we can try to register a new user here. I have this one with a 3 in my email. So I just create that user. And as you can see, that one is created, but it don't have a refresh token now. We haven't logged in and got the refresh token. So it seems to be working now. That's great. So let's get on with it. We also want to be able to log out a user. 3. Log out a user. This one is going to be easy. We have the server.post and we're going to have logout as the endpoint. We have the request. We're not going to use that one, so I mark it with this underscore and we have the response. So when we log out, we just clear the cookie, res.clear cookie, and we called it refresh token. That will make sure that we wipe out the refresh token from the cookie. And we also have to clear the access token from the client, of course, when we log out. But with no refresh token, we can't get a new access token before we log in. And then we just return the response.send and a message logged out. That's our logout. Then number 4, we are going to create a protected route just to show you an example of how you can do this authorization with the token. So we have server.post. We can just call it /protected. This is an async function, so we mark it with async, and we have the request, the response, and an inline arrow function. Then we try, we catch the error. Now we have a const user ID is auth, and we send in the request. We are going to create this one now. So we create a new file inside of this source. That's the last file we're going to create here. We call it isauth.js. And first we are going to import verify. We require it from JSON Web Token. And that's the way we can verify the token that we have in our header. Then we create a function called isauth. We have the request, an error function, const authorization. And from our request and the headers, we are going to grab the one that's called authorization. And this will give us our token. If we don't have any token, if not authorization, then we throw new error. You need to log in. Because if we're not sending a token, we know that the user isn't logged in. So that's why we can throw this error and tell them that they need to log in. Otherwise, we can get the token. So from authorization, we split that one like this. And we grab from index 1 in the array. And this is because the authorization in the header is going to look something like this. Bearer, and then you have the token here. This is a string, so we just strip out bearer and we just grab this one, and that's what we're doing here. So that's how we get the token. So this is a standard as you use bearer and then have the token after that word that's called bearer. Yeah, that's very difficult for me to say because I'm not used to that smooth R's. R. Yeah, you know, it's tough to be from Sweden and try to speak English. All right, so we have our token. Then we're going to grab our user ID. And we get it from verify. And that's from JSON Web Token. We have our token and we verify it with the process.n.access_token secret. So this way we make sure that this is a legit token. And then we just return the user ID. Okay. Module.exports equals isauth. Or you could of course just export it as we did with the fake DB exports.fakedb instead if you want to do that. All right, back inside of index, we need to import isauth const isauth equals require ./isauth.js. And now we can use it here. This is getting a little bit messy here. I know that. And as I said, the code is going to be a bit verbose and there's a lot of code here maybe, but I think it's necessary to fully understand something when explaining advanced stuff like this. If the user ID doesn't equal null, and that's because we could just do it like this, but that will give us a false answer if the ID is 0. So that's why I'm doing this. we have res send the data, and we can just type, this is protected data. All right. And then inside of catch, just as before res send, we send an error message. Like so. So we save this one, and we can see if the protected route works. We can log in again. Protected. And as you can see in the authorization here, we can just grab the access token that we get here. And this is actually an old token now, so it shouldn't work now. It says that you need to log in. So if I just paste in the new token here, it hopefully should work. And it doesn't. All right. Yeah, and of course I can see now I forgot an S here. It should be headers. It's very easy to forget something like that. So I save it, and then we can try it again. Yeah, as you can see, this is protected data. So now we're accessing it with our token, and that's great. Really, really easy to do something stupid like this and forget an S. Hope you didn't do that. That's the second time in this tutorial I did something like this. Right? I have to slap myself in the face because I'm that bad at typing this stuff out. All right. Back inside of index, we know that this one is working, and we just have one more route to create, and then our API will be finished. And that's the route for getting a new access token. So 5, get a new access token with a refresh token. All right. We have server.post /refresh _ token. We have our request and our response and an inline arrow function. We have our token. And now we can just grab it from the request cookies refresh token. That's why we installed the library that's called cookie parser. And if we don't have a token in our request, if not token, return response.send. The access token, we just clear it out, so we just send an empty access token. You could also send a message here also to the client, of course. Otherwise, we have a token. Let's verify it. So with let, we create payload, and we set that one to null for starters. And we have a try and a catch with an error. Inside of our try, we set the payload. We're going to verify. We have the token. That's the one that we grabbed from the cookies. And we have our process.n.refresh token, refresh _ token _ secret. We verify that our token is legit. Otherwise, return response.send. And yet again, we just send an empty access token. We know that the token is valid. So check if user exists. Const user, we go inside our fake DB and find user. We check if our user ID equals to the payload ID, the payload user ID, because we signed our token with the user ID. We get that one when we verify it. If this verify, it will give us the ID. So we can just compare this one with the one in the database and see if it exists there. Valid, it should say. If not user, return response send. Yet again, we send an empty access token because the user didn't exist in the database. User exists, check if refresh token exists on user. If user.refresh token not equals token, if we have another token registered to the user, we don't want to send a new access token. So we just return response send, and we set the access token to an empty string again. Whoa, there's many steps here. Whoa. Token exists. Create new refresh. And access token. So again, we create our access token. Create access token. We send in our user ID. As you can see here, this is repetitive code. We did this up here before. So as I told you before, this code is very verbose. You can refactor it to make it more effective and look a lot more cleaner. But it's good to have it here now so you easily can understand every step and how this works. Then we create the refresh token, also with the user.id. Then we need to update the refresh token in the database. And as I also told you before, you could have different versions here instead of the refresh token. But I will just grab the user and refresh token and mutate this property here with a new refresh token. So this will update it in our temporary database object. All good to go. Send new refresh token and access token. So we send the refresh token. We have the response and the refresh token. And then we return res.send and the access token. Whoa, that was a lot. But hopefully you'll understand all the steps needed here. And you can also see that you need to have some connection to a real database and users that you save somewhere, because this is just fake. So let's save this one, see if it works. No errors, that's good. We can try this out now. First of all, we can log in. We have the refresh token, so we try this. And as you can see, we get a new access token back. That's because our refresh token is saved in the cookies. I think we should be able to see it somewhere. Yeah, here you can see the refresh token that is being sent. But we won't be able to grab it in our JavaScript from the client. And then if we log out like this, we shouldn't be able to get a new access token. Obviously, it has not cleared it from here. Yeah, and I think I know what's wrong. We have to set the path here also. It has to have the same path. Refresh underscore token. Like this. Because we told it to just send this cookie on this path. So when we clear it, we just make sure to include this path here also. So I save this one and go back inside of Postman. And hopefully this will work now. I'll log out. Yeah, and as you can see, it won't give us an access token now. And then we can also try out, we try to log in. Then a new cookie should be set. So I try this route again. And as you can see, we get a new access token. So it's working now. Make sure that you include the path here, otherwise it won't work. All right, so that concludes the server. In the next part, we're going to create a front end with React and use this API. Okay, this is the second part in this tutorial, and we're going to build a front end in this one. And as you can see, I'm inside the JWT Auth folder now that I created in the last part. And I also have this server folder here. And I hope you didn't made the same mistake as I did because I didn't navigate inside of this folder when I created the API. So I had to move all the files manually inside of the server folder. So I navigate inside of that one, and all our files are here for the API. And also we can open up the code. It can always be good to have it here if there's something that we need to change in our API. And actually I had this typo again. I had forgotten I in the origin in the course in the index.js file. Hope you didn't do that mistake also. So make sure that it says origin here, otherwise it won't work. Okay, so back inside of the terminal, we can just npm start and fire up our server. Then I have another tab here in my console, and I'm going to create a React application for our frontend now. I assume that you know React. I'm not going to teach you React or CSS or anything in this course. I'm just going to very quickly create this little application that we can use to communicate with our server to get our JSON Web Tokens and show you how JSON Web Tokens work. All right, we're going to create this application with create React app. So we type npx create -react app, and we're going to call it frontend. And this will create a folder here that's called frontend, and it's going to put all the code inside of that one. So we just have to wait a little bit now. So that's it. We navigate inside the frontend folder and open up our code editor. So this is what we've got here. We have a package.json. It's installed everything for us. And we also have this src folder with different components that it created for us. And we can actually remove some of them here. We can remove the service worker. We can remove the logo. We can remove the app test and the app.css. We're going to create some CSS in this index.css file. And we also have to go inside the index.js. So we remove the service worker and remove all of this stuff here and just save it. And inside our app.js, remove the app.css import and the import of the logo. And for now, we can just remove everything of this and just type out app. And then we can go back inside our console, and we're going to install 2 dependencies. So npm I, we're going to need the reach router for this one, at reach/router. And also I think we're going to need a ESLint-plugin-react-hooks. And while this installs, I can grab some coffee here. That's always a good idea. And as you can see, I'm getting these errors here. They started to appear just recently. I think it is because I'm using both yarn and npm. The create React app, create the app with yarn, and now I'm using npm. But I'm going to show you how to get rid of these if you get these errors. So just wait for it to finish here. So what you can do is you go inside of your code, just remove the node modules folder and also the package lock file. And go inside of the terminal and type npm install. I haven't got time yet to dive deep in this and see what's causing this, so I don't really know actually, but I know that this works. So that's it. We can try npm start. And we navigate to localhost 3000. And as you can see, we're showing app here, so we know that it's working. That's good. So back inside our code editor. And we're going to create a new folder here inside our src folder. Create a new folder, name components. And we're going to scaffold out 5 components. We have one that's called content.js. One that's called login.js. And navigation.js, protected.js, and register.js. And we can just scaffold out them now, and we'll come back to them later. So we import React from React. we create a functional component called content equals and an arrow function. And for now, we just return a div that says content. And we export default content. All right. So we can just copy this one now. Make sure you save it also, of course, and go inside login. And we change this content to login and save it. Move on to the navigation. Change content to navigation. Save it. And inside protected, the same thing. Protected. And the register. So this is just the scaffolding of this. We'll come back to them later. And I can also say that this application will also be a bit verbose in the code and has maybe a lot of redundant code. For example, the login and the register component will have almost the same code inside of them. That's actually intentionally because I think that I will make this as easy as possible for you. But this is not in any way, just as with the API, a production finished application. We're just creating it in educational purpose. So bear with me with that one. Okay. And we have to create some CSS for this one also. So we can do that right now when we're at it. So inside of the index.css file, we have this body. We can actually remove this code. And up here, we can add the background. And it's going to be steel blue. Just keep everything else here. It doesn't really matter. Then we have the .app class. And with text align, we set at the center. We set the min height of 100 viewport height. We display flex. We set the flex direction to column. We align items to center. And also justify content to center. We set the color to white, FFF, and the font size to 16 pixels. Okay. Then we have a class that's called login-wrapper. We set the min height to 200 pixels. We set the min width to 300 pixels. We set the background to white, the padding to 20 pixels, the border dash top to 5 pixels, and light blue and solid. We set the color to black, 000. Okay, that's our login wrapper. And we are, of course, going to use these classes in our components. In a production app, I would use style components, but in this case, we're just importing a regular CSS file. And yeah, that's no good to do it like that, but it'll work for us in this application. Then we have .login-input, and we're going to have a button in that one. So we set the background on the button to light blue. We display block. We set the width to 100%. The height to 50 pixels. Yeah, and that's it for that one. Then on the same class, login-input, we're going to have our input fields. And we can display block. We set the padding to 20 pixels. The width is going to be 100%. The height is going to be 50 pixels. And the margin 10 pixels 0. We set the box sizing to border box. Okay, just a few more. We have to style our unordered list that we're going to have for our navigation. So we have our UL list-style-type. We set that one to none. We set the margin to 40 pixels auto. We set the width to 300 pixels. and the padding to 0. Then we have the ULLI element. We display inline dash block and set the margin to 10 pixels. All right, and then the last one, and that's the link, that's the A tag. We set the color to white, FFF, and text decoration to none. So that's our CSS. And we can already see that it's changing here, and that's good. Okay, we can move inside our app.js file now, and we're going to create this one. First, we're going to add some imports here. We're going to use stayed and also use effect for this one. And then we import router and navigate from @reach_router. Okay, then we import all our components. So we import navigation from ./components/navigation. We can just copy this one, paste it in 4 times, and we change these ones here. This one is going to be the login, and this one register, protected. As you can see, I'm changing it in 2 places at the same time here, so make sure you also change the path here. And the last one is going to be our content. All right, so that's our component. Then we're going to create a context that we're going to use for, almost like a global state here. By creating a context, we can access the state inside of all our components in the application. So we export const user context and react dot create context. And for now, it can just be an empty array. So that is going to be our context. And inside of our app component, we are going to create some local state. First, we have our const with our user and set user. That is going to hold our access token. So use state, and it's going to be an empty object for now. And we create another one, loading and set loading, and use state, and we set that one to true. Because when this application runs, we're going to have a use effect that will fire off and send our refresh token to get a new access token if we have a refresh token. So that way we don't have to log in. In a production app, you wouldn't do it this way. You probably will have a library, for example, Apollo or something that will handle this for you when you have a real database to connect to. But for now, for this tutorial, as I said, I will do this as simple as possible. So we're just using the thing we got in React, and we're going to grab it with a use effect. We're also going to have a couple of functions in this one. So we have const logout callback. And this one is obviously going to be for our logout button, and it's going to be async. And we leave it empty for now. Then we're going to have our use effect. And that one is also going to be empty for now. We give it an empty array here also as a dependency. So then we can create our JSX for this one. So we have this div with the class name of app. We're going to wrap it with our context. So we have our user context dot provider. And the value is going to be an array with our user and set user. So this is the way we can pass this state down to all our components. We close it. We move this one inside of that one. All right, then we have our app, and then we're going to have our navigation. The navigation is going to have a logout callback. So this is a prop, so we send in our logout callback function. So that one. Then we're going to have our router. We're going to change routes here depending on what page we're on. So we have an ID of router. And then we just have our components here. We have our login component that's going to have a path of login. Then we have our register. That's going to have a path of register and or protected. That has the path of protected. Whoops. It should self-close like this. And then we have our content. And this one is going to have the path of a / because that's our main landing page. That's our home page. And I think this is it for this component. Actually, for now, of course, we're going to fill this out with more code later. But we can save it and see what we've got. So we've got the navigation and content here, and that's great. So we can actually create our navigation now. So make sure you navigate inside of your navigation.js file. So we're already importing React. We're also going to import link from @reachRouter. Okay, then we got our navigation here. We're going to destructure out our prop or logout callback. And here we create parentheses. And actually we can remove this one because we're going to have an unordered list here. And then we create our menu items. So we have an li element. We have a link, and it's going to link to a / That's our home page. So we name it home. And we can actually copy this one and paste it in 3 times. And this link is going to go to protected. And we type out protected. And this one is going to go to register. And register. And the last one is not going to have a link, actually. It's going to have a button. So we have a button with an on-click handler. And that's going to be our prop logout callback. And we can just type out logout. So this is it for our navigation. We save this one and see what we've got. Yeah, we have our navigation here. And as you can see, it changed routes here. And that's good. And it also changed component here. So our navigation is working and our routing is working. That's nice. Okay, so we can move on to create our content component. So inside the content.js file, up here, we're also going to import use context. That's a hook that we'll use to grab our context. Then we import a component that's named redirect from @reachRouter. And we also import our user context. We grab that from .. and it's in our app. All right, then we have our content component. We can remove this one and create curly braces. Because inside of here, we're going to check if our context, if our state in the context, the user, contain our access token. So we can grab that one first, const user. We use context. That's the context hook that we imported up here. Then we send in our user context, and this will give us our user. So if we not have a user.access token, we just return, and we have the redirect component from the reachRouter library. We set that one to an empty string, and we're going to redirect them to the login, because if we don't have an access token, we want them to log in, and we don't want to show the content here. And we can also have no throw, like this. Otherwise, if we have an access token, we return a div, and here we can have our content. So this is the content. Okay, so this is it. If you're using something like, as I said, Apollo or something, you should have that one to check if the access token has expired or not. And if it has expired, you can automatically in the background grab a new access token if you still have a valid refresh token. But I won't go through that here. I'm not doing that here. So if the access token expires, it won't grab a new one from the refresh token endpoint automatically. Okay, we'll save it and we can go to our start page. And as you can see, it's showing us the login page. We don't have an access token. So that's why it's redirecting us to the login page. And that's great. So we can actually create our login page now. So make sure you're in the login.js file. Up here, we're going to import some more stuff from React. We're going to use state, use context, and use effect. And we're also going to import navigate from @reachRouter. And we import our user context from ../app. All right. And then we have our component here. We can remove this one and create curly braces. First, we grab our context, const user and set user equals use context, and we send in our user context. Then we're going to have two local states for this one. It's going to be one for the email and one for the password. That's the input fields that we're going to have in this one. So we create a const email and set email, use state, and it's going to be an empty string for now. And then we have the password and set password equals use state and an empty string, like so. Then we're going to have two functions in this one. We're going to have one that's called handle submit, and it's obviously going to handle the submit of the form. It's going to be async, and we have the event and an arrow function, and we leave it empty for now. Then we're going to have one that's called handle change, and this one is going to be when we type something in the input boxes, and we have the event and an arrow function for this one also. So we can start typing out our JSX that we're going to return for this one. So return parenthesis. We have a div with a class name of login-wrapper. We have our form that is going to have an on submit, and we just call our handle submit function on that one. And inside of our form, we're going to have our input fields, but first we're going to have a div with a header, or maybe, yeah, you can actually have an h2 tag that says login. And then we have an input. It's going to have a value. We grab that from our state email. This is going to be a control component. So on change, we call our handle change. It's going to be the type text. Name is going to be email. The placeholder is going to be email. And I think we need to have something that's called autocomplete email. And we can copy all of this and paste it in below. All of these we change to password. Place all maybe a capital P, and this one I think should say current-password. So make sure you change all of these here. Then we of course need a submit button. So below here we create a button, type submit, and it can say login. Yeah. Yeah, and we also have to wrap these inputs in a div that's called class name login-input. So move this, everything here inside of this div. Something like this. The auto formatting isn't working here now for me, so I have to do it manually. Okay, we save that one, and we can see what we've got so far. Yeah, this one shouldn't be all the way out to the edges. I don't know why. We'll look into that later. Okay, so let's get back inside of our login.js file. So first we have this handle change, because when we type something here, it doesn't show anything now at all. So we have to hook this up to our state, so we'll show the values. So we have this handle change. We got the event here, so we can just check if the event dot current target e.name equals email. Then we can set email e.currentTarget.value. Right? We just have two input fields in this one, so we can just make an else here. We know that otherwise it's the set password we should call e.currentTarget.value. So we save this one and we can see if it works. Yeah, and as you can see, we can type something here now, and that's great. It works. All right. Then we have our handle submit, and this one is going to do all the job for us to grab the token from our API. So the first thing we have to do inside of here is to prevent default. We don't want to send the form because we want to handle this ourselves. Then we have const result. We're going to await, and we await again. We fetch from http://localhost, and our server is at port 4000, and we're going to hit the endpoint login. Then we have a comma and an object because we need to send in some stuff here also. We set the method to post. We set credentials to include. Then we have our headers, and our headers is going to be content-type application/JSON. All right. So we're setting the type of our headers here. And then we have our body, and that is going to be JSON.stringify. We have to make it a string. And we have our email. Actually, as it's the same here, we can just type out email, and the same with password. And here we have .json. We call that one. That's why we await two times here. First, we await the fetch, and then we await when we convert it to JSON. So that will give us the result in this const here. So if result.accessToken, if we got an access token, we can set the user. So we set the access token, and we grab that from the result.accessToken. Then when we have set the access token, we want to navigate back to the home page. Else, if we don't got an access token, we can just console log the result.error. All right. And if we want, we can also create a use effect here. When the user change, we create a dependency array with the user, and we can just console log out the user so we see what's changed inside of that one. All right, so we save this one, and we can try it out. So let's go to our application and inspect. I want to look in the console. We reload it. You can see we have an empty object here to start with because we console log out our user state or access token state. We can try to log in here. Then you can see we console log out the error here, and it tells us that we not sent along a valid password. And my password is going to be test. And as you can see, we got the access token here, and now we're redirected to the start page, and it's showing us the content. So that's good. But we're not grabbing a new access token now, as you can see here. So it will wipe out the state every time we reload this, but we'll fix this later. So we store the access token in our state in the application. We're not storing it in local storage or anything like that. We're just having it in our application. And the refresh token is being sent to the client as a protected cookie. So we can't really do anything with that cookie with our JavaScript code. So back inside our code, and we can actually go inside of the app.js file, and in our use effect here, I can make some comment. First thing, get a new access token if a refresh token exists. All right, So inside our use effect, we're going to create an async function. Check refresh token. So we yet again have const result, and we await again. Fetch, and this time we're going to hit our endpoint for the refresh token. So localhost port 4000 / refresh _ token, comma, and we have an object here, method post credentials. This one has to be included, otherwise the cookie won't be included and it won't work. So needed to include the cookie. We have our headers. We set the content type to application / JSON. I actually think that this is the default, but it won't hurt to have it here. And then here, .json. So we can set the user, the access token. We grab it from result, access token. So this will set it in either case, because either we got an empty access token or we got the access token. So it will set it to an empty string, or we set it to the actual access token that we got. Then we can set the loading to false. All right. And just below here, we call the check refresh token. And we have to do it like this because you can't have an async use effect. So you just create an async function inside of the use effect and you call it like this. And this means that it will just fire off this when we mount the application. So this will just run one time. And we can actually, before we return our JSX, we can actually check if loading. Then we just return a div. We return a div that says loading. So we save this one. And we can try it out. As you can see here now, as I reload the page, you can see that it loading flashes here. So it grabs the new access token from our refresh token endpoint. So that's good. We don't have to log in as long as we have a valid refresh token. So that's how a refresh token works. As long as it's valid, you can just call that endpoint with the refresh token and it will send back a valid access token for you to use in your application. So that's very convenient to have that one and don't need to log in every time. Then we can create our logout function here as we're in this component now. So we have this logout callback. For this one, we can just await, fetch. And from our local host, port 4000, we have this endpoint that's called logout. And we set the method to post. And we can also include the credentials like so. And then this will wipe out the cookie, but we also want to reset our application on the front end. Clear user from context. Set user, and we just give it an empty object for this one. And then we also want to navigate back to start page. So navigate and /. All right, we save it and we can see if it works. We log out and you can see we go to start page. You can see that it redirects us to the login. That means that we don't have a refresh token now because we logged out. So we log in again and it's showing us the content. And that's great. And if we'll reload it, it will grab a new access token as long as we don't log out. But if we log out, it wipes out the refresh token, so we have to log in again. All right, great, it works. You can also see here in the console log that the access token is just an empty string. Okay, we can create the register component also, and we can actually just copy all the code from the login component and paste it in the register component. Of course, we're going to rename this to register and also export default register. And we have to change a few things here now. We're not going to need the context for this one or the use effect, just the use state. So we can delete these ones here and delete the context. We are going to use the email and the password local state. And this one, we change this to register. So we hit the register endpoint instead. The method is going to be post credentials. Yeah, we can try it. We don't need to include the credentials here because we won't send along the cookie. The headers can stay the same. The body, the same. Everything is the same here. And we're not setting a user here. So we can just remove this one. And if result.error, we can just console log. We want to know the error. So console log result message. No, this is actually if we don't have an error. So we just can console log out the message we get back. And then we want to navigate to the front page, to the home page. Else, then we console log out the result.error. All right. We can remove the use effect. The handle change is going to be the same. And we can change this one to register instead. Everything else is going to be the same. Yeah. And also this one here should say register. And we save it and we can see if it works. So we go to the register and you can see it changes here. It's the exact same otherwise, but we just change these ones here. So we can just try to register without a user. As you can see, we can now create, this is a bug here actually, we can create an empty user and that shouldn't be possible. So we have to check that in our API also, of course, but not for this tutorial. Okay, so we just created an empty user and we can see in our console, if we go to our API here, you can see that we created this one with an empty email and this password that gets generated is from an empty string. And that's no good, of course. But if we try to create a user that's the same as already in the database, it should warn us, yeah, user already exists. And it doesn't matter if we write another password here or something, but we can create, maybe put a 2 there and we register. And you can see the user is created. And we console log it out here so we can see that it gets created and is put in the database. That's not the database, that's our fake database. Maybe you should get logged in automatically when you create a user. And we're actually logged in as another user now because, yeah, this is not a production app and I just want to show you how this stuff works now. So, yeah, we just created a user, but we logged in as another user, and that's no good, of course. But it works. We can register a user and we can log in and we can log out. So if we log in with the new user we created, you can see first, yeah, it says that the password is not correct and I had the same password. We can log in with that user instead. So that's great. Okay, it's working. So this is how the flow is when you send tokens to your client and to your API. And yeah, it's very convenient that you don't have to log in all the time and you can just have these tokens that will simplify everything for you. That will simplify everything for your user. It's not simple to do this stuff, actually. Okay, so we have one more thing to do. We have to create a protected route to show you how you can protect data and use your token to get that data. Yeah, and I just realized why our CSS isn't working as it should. And that's because if we move inside of the app.js file, the class name is a capital A here on app. So just change that one to a lowercase a and save it, and it should work. Yeah, it's a little bit nicer now. You can see it looks more like a regular login form now. And yeah, it's centered and the nice stuff like that. So yeah, that's great. Move back inside of the protected.js file. For this one, we are going to need the use effect, the use state, and the use context. We're also going to import the user context from ../app. And we can remove this one and create curly braces. So we have the const user, and we use context and send in our user context. Then we create the local state, content, and set content. Use state, and we give it an initial string of you need to log in. And of course, there's many ways of doing this. So this is just one way to show you a simple solution how we can get the protected data and show it in our component. Then we're going to have a use effect. And this one is going to fire off when the user changes. So we create an async function that's called fetch protected. We have yet again the const or result. We await, and we await again the fetch. And from our local host /protected, we are going to grab our data. We have a method of post. The headers are going to be content-type application /JSON. Then we have authorization. And this is really important here. We send along this property here that's called authorization. We give it a string. We have backticks here now with a bearer. And then we give it the user access token and end it with a backtick. So this is the standard of sending your access token. You have this bearer in front of the access token. So that's what we stripped away in our API when we get the access token. And we actually can look at it here. Up here, you see, we get the token by splitting authorization, and we get an array with the values. And the value at the index 1 is going to be our access token. So we remove the bearer this way, or the bearer. Yeah, I really don't know how you pronounce that. Yeah. So, yeah, it may be wrong, but I hope you understand what I mean. So that's how we send along the access token. And down below here, we just convert it to JSON. And then if result.data, if we get some data back, we set the content with result.data. And here we have to call our fetch protected. Down below here, we just return a div with the content. So obviously, this is not going to change if we don't get any data. We're just displaying you need to log in. Otherwise, we display the data we get back. So we can save this one now and see if it works. You see, we could log in now with not a user or a password because we created a completely empty user and you shouldn't be able to do that. But we logged in now and we can see if the protected works. No, it doesn't work actually. So we have to figure out why. Yeah, and I've done it again. I can see here now there should be an S there. I missed that again. I think that's the third or fourth time in this tutorial. So it's really easy to do something like this, especially when you sit here and record everything and are going to show you this stuff. So yeah, make sure you have an S on the headers. So I try to log in. And I go to the protected route. And it says this is protected data. So that's good. That's fine. It was just that little S that messed everything up here. That's the beauty of coding. One little small typo can ruin everything for you. So as you can see, we're getting the protected data because we send along the access token here. So that's how you protect data with your API, and you need a user to send along the access token to get the data. So this is it, actually. Maybe it seems a little bit much, and yeah, it is. Authorization and authentication is really advanced stuff, so it should be a lot. I think I actually find it a bit hard to explain also because it's a very advanced topic, and I hope you learned something from it. I will appreciate if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can also add me at Twitter at Weibenfalk. I also got a few premium courses in React out there. They're on my own platform, www.weibenfalk.com, and I have a few on Udemy also now, but I'm going to move them to my own platform in the future. So, hope you enjoyed it. See you in another one.